Awesome, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll actually go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Monday. Happy International Women's Day. My name is Saphyere Redding. I am a recruitment and case specialist here at the Knowledge House. If you don't know about the Knowledge House, we are a change organization. We empower and sustain a talent pipeline of technologists, entrepreneurs, and digital leaders who will uplift their communities out of poverty. And we do that through our digital skills program. So thank you so much for joining us today on our Empower Women in Tech. Today, we want to celebrate the tremendous strides by women around the world, specifically in technology. And so we have a fantastic event for you today. So thank you so much for joining us. We're all about women empowerment every day, but specifically today because it is International Women's Day. Shout outs to Cloudinary for sponsoring this event and providing the giveaways for today. Thank you so much for your continued support. So today we have a phenomenal panel of change agents within the tech industry, some phenomenal women. So today we're going to go ahead and jump into the panel, and then we'll give some space for later on. Today we'll have some opportunities for any of the participants to provide any questions that they may have. So please go ahead and comment in the chat if you do have any. If you have any questions, go ahead and please put it in the chat. We are monitoring that. So when we do get to that space where you can ask your questions, we'll go ahead and do that. But we'll actually go ahead and get started with the panel. So we do have some phenomenal women here. And so we definitely want to highlight them. And that way you'll also know who to pin in the Zoom call. So I'm going to go ahead because I want to get it right. So I have their bios over here. I want to get it right. So first, we do have Taye. She, her, is a tech educator that soothes the curiosity of those who want to learn more about tech, but who do not know where to begin. Nicknamed the Quiet Storm, Taye is a proud introvert who spends most of her time divulging in a sea of data. Her love of data has propelled her on her mission to educate the masses. She currently works as a data analytics manager at Eidolon Communications. Prior to joining Eidolon, Taye worked as an after-school coding instructor for a New York City public school. She also serves on CUNY Tech Prep's advisory board. So welcome, Taye. Woo-hoo. We also have Maia Ervin. Maia is a Black college graduate hailing from Queens, New York. She currently serves as the Chief People Officer at JUV. If Maia is not standing in a line at Bedside Fish Fry, you can find her listening to podcasts, searching for hair tutorials on YouTube. That's my thing. Or a new Spotify playlist for every mood to ever exist. At JUV, Maia mainly oversees social impact, human resources, and company culture. She uses her experience as a queer Black woman speaking out against systematic oppression and inequities to foster work policies and culture that disenfranchised folks can thrive in and be proud of. Living in Brooklyn, you can find Maia loving on her fur baby or working on her passion project, Big Fish, Sink or Swim. Big Fish is a podcast made for and by Black women to discuss all things taboo. Her dream is to continue to provide platforms for young Black women to express themselves authentically without judgment, fostering comfortable spaces where Black folks can express and create comfortably will always be top of mind for Maia. And last but not least, we have Prajanma Singh. She is a product marketer at Cloudinary, born and brought up in a small remote town in India. She took what was considered an unconventional path for women back then and decided to get into tech. She has spent 9+ years working in tech startups like Cloudinary and App Annie and corporations like Google and Expedia. She has worn many hats in her career, from an analyst to working in sales, and considers herself a lifelong learner. She's previously done work with underprivileged kids and on girl child education in India. In her spare time, Prajanma loves traveling, reading, and thinking of ways to lead a more sustainable life. So, welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. So we know that STEM jobs have grown 79% since 1990. Yet there are only 25% of women working in the tech industry. And when you get into Asian, African Americans, and Hispanic women, it's even lower than that. So, what does International Women's Day mean to you? Anyone can jump in on that one.
I'll go first. I'll break the ice. Hi, guys. Excited to chat with a lot of y'all today. I think that International Women's Day, what it means to me is recognizing the plight and the struggles of the women that I don't see face to face every day. I think that it's so easy for a lot of us to be stuck in our bubbles of what's going on in our own personal lives or what's going on for me as a Black woman living in America. But I think that it's easy to forget that we're fighting for equality for all women and for all marginalized groups across the globe, not just the ones that are within proximity to me. So I think that it's a reminder for myself. I can't speak for everybody, but definitely a reminder for myself to check that, to to remind myself, to continue to educate myself on what's going on outside of my space. And I think a good example of that for me was seeing what was happening in Nigeria was the start of that for me, which is kind of sad because that's kind of late as a 24-year-old or 25. I just turned 25. But I think moments like this definitely remind me to continue to do that work to figure out what's happening to my people across the globe.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Maya. Does anybody else want to tap into that one?
I can add on. So hi everyone who have joined us today. First of all, happy International Women's Day to everyone. Yeah, so similar to what Maya said, right? That probably resonates with a lot of us. For me, personally, it means that it's a acknowledgement or not to the fact that in terms of women equality, we still have a long way to go. So just some of the facts that you mentioned, Sapphire, that 25% of the women, there are only 25% of women in STEM jobs, although the growth in this sector has been tremendous over the last few years. So that is, it's obviously not going to be solved in one day or 1 year, but this is the day when, we bring people all over the world together, men and women, to focus on this issue and focus on the fact that there is still a long way to go for all of us when it comes to women equality.
And so, who has paved the way for you? So, Maya, who has paved the way for you on your journey?
I will have to say, who has paved the way for me? I think having a mentor in some capacity is super important. When I first graduated college, I was just applying to a bunch of jobs because I knew student loans was going to end up kicking in and I needed to do what I had to do. So I was just applying to everything on Indeed at that point. And I applied to a job, a public relations associate for an online fintech company. And Lord knows I did not want to work there. I was 22. I have no idea, like, these mortgage vocabulary. Like, it was just not my front of mind as a 22-year-old, but like, you do what you have to do. And when I did the interview, the woman, her name is Erica Dumas. She is vice president of communications at Mercury, which is a political communication firm. She was working there at the time, and she was like, well, what do you want to do? Because I know that this isn't it. So like, tell me about your passions and tell me about your goals. And she essentially took me under her wing because it just so happened that our passions and our goals aligned at the time. At the time, I thought I wanted to get into politics, and that's what she was doing / heading. And just even though I was in a space or industry that I knew that I didn't want to be in, just being around somebody in which our goals and our morals were aligned, in which she could take me under her wing, and educate me on the do's and the don'ts, or just put me onto game about working in corporate settings, whether I agreed with those corporate standards or not, putting me on to what they were. That was super, super important. So just having that representation, especially being a first generation low income student, my mother never went to college. So a lot of the things that I was encountering or going through, she had not experienced. So having folks that look like me going through the same thing as me was super important in paving the way and helping me kind of navigate my journey.
Awesome. That's super important for sure. That's definitely important. It seems like you definitely got some exposure along the way, even to some industries that you weren't necessarily even interested in. So that's definitely something that us at TKH, we're always trying to do, is like encourage more folks to look into tech. And so definitely glad that you were able to get that. Prajanma, who paved the way for you?
I would say along the journey, a lot of people, including women and men. So um, yeah, as you mentioned in my bio, right, I'm from a really small town in India, so born and brought up over there. My mom didn't have higher education, but she encouraged me from the very beginning to get higher education and like get a job, be financially independent. And I think that was the foundation or the building block uh, when I started thinking about it. It wasn't a very conventional route to even have a career for, for women in the town where I come from. And my teachers encouraged me in school, and they put a lot of confidence and faith in me. So I think that gave me a lot of strength. When I entered the corporate world, the managers along the way who mentored me and nurtured me and gave me the opportunity, which might have seemed daunting, they sort of put the confidence in me and said, "No, you can do it." Like, as women, we suffer from imposter syndrome, and we are like, "No, maybe I'm not the right one for the job." But when you have somebody who puts their faith and confidence in you and supports you and be your mentor and you can learn from them, I think that's paved the way for me. Like, those are the people who contributed to my growth and my learning experiences. Oh, actually, I would also say my partner. he he is an equal partner in a lot of sense, and he always encourages me to sort of go beyond what I think I'm capable of. So he's always like, no, get out of your comfort zone. uh, so I think a lot of encouragement comes from there as well.
Yes, yes. We love a supportive partner. Yes. And so,
Very
Tay, what about
important.
you? Yes. So, Tay, how about you? Who paved the way for you?
Of course, I'm going to be like a Debbie Downer. I didn't have anyone to pave the way for me. Like most of my jobs in data were created for me. I was definitely the only Black developer in a lot of the startups that I worked for. So I didn't have any role models that were necessarily women or men. I actually had the opposite effect of like, we don't want you here. So it was more of I paved the way for other people to come behind me now that I've moved up a little bit. I'm a little bit older. I'll be 29 this year. So I've been working in data since undergrad, since I was an intern. I'm originally from New York. So I've been moving my way up through data. And it hasn't been easy, but it's something that I genuinely like. I love numbers, I love systems, and I kind of like morph myself into becoming my own role model. And sometimes for some of us in tech, for women in different types of spaces, we have to do that if we are in a space where we don't see people who look like us. And more often than not, when I was in those startups, when I was 21, 22, I was the only woman. I definitely was the only Black woman in a lot of spaces. So now it's a lot better. I see a lot more Black women in data, and especially when I speak at conferences. But before, I didn't have that. A lot of my role models were men, and they were men of color. So I saw all the Black men in tech, and then I saw them engineers, and I was like, oh, I want to be like you. And it was just like, we don't have any girls over here. It's like a bro network. So things have definitely gotten a little bit better, and I just want to continue to see the growth as far as like exposing women, particularly Black women, in areas where they might not see themselves. So I guess hopefully I'm kind of becoming the role model for other people as well.
Thank you so much, Tay. That, we do have a lot of people are in that same space, right? Like you don't see a lot of people who look like you. And so you have to pave your own way. So kudos to you for creating those spaces for other people. And so that actually goes hand in hand with our next question. What can companies do to encourage more women to join their companies? And Taye, I know you had mentioned like you didn't see a lot of them. It was kind of like the good old boys club, right? And it still somewhat is that. And so for you, what would you say that companies can do to encourage more women to join their company?
I would say definitely having like more like initiatives where they can have like, AMAs or speaking series like this, where they can see professionals join and see like, hey, we already work in these spaces. Even if it's not the company, they see other women in the industry who are making waves, because that's what it is. Sometimes you might not have a manager directly in your team who supports you, but you'll have like another manager in another team, or you might have a volunteer gig that you're doing, or you might do a fellowship. So it might not come from your direct employer, but just being aware of different names in the industry can be really, really helpful. Kind of like pique your interest. That's how I ended up in data. I was listening to other professionals like, hey, I want to do that. Even if it wasn't my direct job who was my sponsor, I had other professionals who were like, oh, you're interested in numbers, I'm going to go ahead and connect you with this professional. And sometimes that's all you need. So if companies can think about like having internal initiatives to kind of expose their staff to women in that area, I think that'll kind of make it a little bit more better. I know sometimes they have that with employee resource groups, where they'll have like external events so that you see diversity, what's going on in the industry. Sometimes you'll have people from like competing companies come in and speak. And that has been really, really helpful. And those are the things that I really, really loved.
Thank you. Thank you. Super important. I know the ERGs are super important. I know we just celebrated Black History Month. And so I saw a ton of tech events kind of centered around Black ERGs. So definitely hope that there are more of those supportive networks within the tech industry and in these companies. So Prajanma, what about you? I know that you said that you're from a small town in India. And so I can imagine that maybe there weren't a lot of women that you saw in there. So what would you say that companies could be doing more of to encourage women to join their companies?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I've worked in a lot of teams where there are just like guys and I'm the only women over there. But I've also worked in organizations who actually took this thing very seriously. So a couple of examples that I can share from that is, having an organizational initiative saying that we need women representation across the board, like in senior leadership, as well as, we'll be hiring more women and making it responsibility of everybody. So making sure if you're hiring, things like you have the training for unconscious bias, so that while hiring, somebody doesn't make decisions based on the unconscious bias or inherent biases that we all have. Making sure that when you're putting out those job postings, then they are more neutral in language versus leaning towards or like suggesting that, somebody will be more successful in this job. So it is sort of a well thought out organizational initiative can make a lot of difference in companies. And I also saw some people doing really cool things. So one of my friends, he's hiring for a startup in London, and there were only male employees in the company. And he said that for these roles, I'm only going to interview women. I'll just interview women because I want to make sure that due to inherent biases, we don't make judgment mistakes. And that was a great way to increase women in the company. And there's another startup founder over here who is actually looking at the process in terms of, not even looking at your CVs when you're applying, but just answering some screening questions. And then you evaluate those screening answers that, people gave. And based on those, you go to the next step of the interview. So again, like removing a lot of inherent biases at that initial stage itself, and making sure that you get the right people in the pipeline, irrespective of like their gender, etc.
No, that's super important. I mean, my shirt says, oh, future is female, the past, present, and the future is female. So I'm just putting that out there. I know the shirt only says future, but let's be honest, we won the world, so we hold it down. So we definitely need to get more women in there. So I'm glad that there have been some initiatives made in that process to remove those inherent biases. So kudos to your firm for doing that. Maia, what advice would you give for women looking to break into tech? So we know that the reality is it's the good old boys club, but what would you say is some advice that you can give for women looking into breaking into the tech industry?
Yes, sorry, I was plugging in my computer. I was doing a lot of up and down movement just now. So this is kind of, I hope this is advice. What I would say is that no journey looks the same. And also it's also never too late to switch your journey and start to go into this. I was, like I mentioned before, working at a fintech company, and I actually ended up quitting and going to a different company. And that did not work out. My boss was absolutely terrible. I'm not sure if most of y'all know, but I'm sure some of y'all know the main reason why lots of people leave their jobs is because of their direct managers. And she was just not a great person. And I left because I felt like our values and our goals just weren't aligned. And because I was already sort of in the space that I thought I wanted to be in, I had a lot of hesitation about leaving. And even though like I was only 22, like I really could just start over whenever. But being the fact that I had gotten into the field that I wanted to be in so quickly after I graduated, I sort of felt like, okay, am I taking a step back? Will I ever find the correct space for me in which like the company will share the same values that I have and that will be aligned on the same goals? That was super important to me. And I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to find that because there were a lot of things that would happen in the workplace that I didn't necessarily agree with, or a lot of taboos that I didn't stand behind. Especially when you're in a male dominated or a white dominated field, it is hard navigating those spaces. So I ended up starting over and I kept looking for a company that I thought that I could create spaces to make other folks feel comfortable. And I did end up finding that at Juve, and ended up becoming the chief people officer. Well, now it is my job to continue to create these spaces. So I don't know if that's necessarily advice, but I wish somebody would have told me that when I was fresh out of college trying to figure it the hell out, was that like, you'll figure it out. You're only 22. Like, stop trying to be 45. Everything will be okay. And you will find the place that'll make you feel comfortable enough to thrive and continue to be there and continue to nurture your own professional and personal goals. And if you don't, it's okay to keep searching. So that's sort of my advice. So if you're not there yet, if you're at a company in which you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel safe being the only woman or the only woman of color, or the only person of color in the department, and you feel like you don't have the agency to have these conversations with your leadership, you can find an environment where that isn't the case, or you can find an environment where you're allowed to have the agency to create that space. But it's not easy. I will say that. I know I'm saying it like it's easy. It's not easy, and I do recognize that that is a privilege that I have. And it's not always, easy to find those spaces, but I do believe that they can be found. But they might be few in between.
Yes, I think that's super important. I think, like you said, having that agency in that space just to have those conversations is super important. I think because we know that a lot of companies are probably going to be utilizing this month to have a lot of more like women-centered events. And so I think also utilizing this time frame that we have right now to have those conversations, because we know that companies are going to be utilizing this time right now to showcase their women that are in their organization. So I think if not, utilize March to be that time and utilize that space, because we know that they're going to be having events centered around that. What about you, Taye? Because I know you said that you didn't necessarily see a lot of women in that data space. And so were you able to have some of those conversations? And like, what advice would you give folks, women specifically?
Okay, so for me, it's a little bit different. My advice would definitely just be, don't let anyone like stop your shine. I had to deal with adversity. I'm very, very candid. I wrote about it in blog features about my experience of like, the gaslighting and the hazing and like, are you smart enough to be here? Like all of that unnecessary stuff that came with the job was something that if you didn't have a good support system, or you didn't have things that you use to keep your mental health in check, you would probably burn out and leave the industry, because it can be a lot, because it's different layers. It's you being Black, it's you being a woman, and then sometimes it's how you look and how you present, because I'm not conceited in any way, but I feel like I'm a look on a good day. So you got to understand that some of these guys, they go out to the bar and then they'll say something in your ear. You're just like, you're not even my type. So you're just being honest with yourself and saying, like, I'm here to work, and I don't want, how I am to get in the way of that. And sometimes it can wrestle in your mind, like, am I in the right spot? So just not letting anybody take you off your path is something that I wish someone would have told me, because I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't. And because I wasn't around people who were in that space that I knew personally, I had to find my niche of people who supported me. And it took a while. It took a couple of years, but I found them, thankfully. And I've been able to have that good, solid support system and professional network, people who talk about me when I leave the room and say positive things, or people who reach out just to check in. Like, I have a good, solid support system professionally and personally. So I think that's something to be very, very mindful of, is just like, don't let anyone get in your ear. Don't let anyone try to stop you from your path.
Thank you. Super important for sure. Don't get knocked off your path, ladies. And so what barriers do women have to face? And like you had mentioned, don't let anybody, knock you off that path. But what barriers do women have to face, or that you maybe personally experienced breaking into the tech industry? So Prajanma, do you have any barriers or anything that maybe you specifically have faced?
So I'm just thinking about, when I applied for my first role in the tech industry, it actually took me a long time to apply, because I think that was a barrier I was probably creating for myself. I was like, maybe I won't get the job. Maybe I need more experience, or I fit these 3 requirements, but not these 4 requirements. I think I should have applied earlier. Or I would encourage everybody, whether you fit that exact job description or not is not the question. If you really want that job and you think you meet the requirements, at a high level, go and apply for it. Go for it. Worst case, you'll get a rejection. Big deal. That shouldn't stop you from applying for a job or a role somewhere. So I think that was one of the barriers that probably I created for myself. Apart from that, yeah, once you get it into tech, as like Taye and Maia shared their experience, it's not easy. You probably don't have a lot of people who are women or who look like you, so it can get lonely. But I think it's important to understand that you're not alone. So find your people, find your support system. There were times where I was rethinking whether I should be in tech. I was rethinking whether I should even work, whether this is good for my mental health. But having that support system of friends, of mentors, actually helped me through that time. And I'm sure, like, all of us on this call today would have faced those kind of scenarios or situation. I know that I'm not alone in this. I'm not going through this experience by myself. So just knowing that helped me get through those difficult phases and times as well.
Yes, thank you. It's definitely inevitable that we're probably all going to face some type of imposter syndrome, right? Where we're going to be like, no, we'll say no to ourselves before we let somebody else say no. And I definitely want to just times 10 what you just said about just going out there, right? They always say, like, you miss every shot you don't take, right? So definitely making sure that we are doing ourselves a service and actually going out there, right? And I know nowadays a lot of companies are probably I know I've noticed some companies are making a note in their job descriptions where they're saying, like, if you fit at least 60% of the qualifications, apply. So I think also that they're being mindful of that, right? Because a lot of times we do tend to not apply for these opportunities because we're like, we don't fit that, we don't have enough experience. And so I think that's definitely real. And I know within my role here at the Knowledge House, I'm a case specialist, and so I'm supporting a lot of students, having a lot of check-ins, and it is a recurring theme of, like, a lot of students not feeling like they meet qualifications, but we're constantly encouraging them to go for it. Like, you go for it. What's the worst they can do? Say no, right? But there's multiple opportunities out there for you to take advantage of. So definitely kudos to that. Definitely appreciate that for sure. What about you, Maya? Like, has there been any barriers that maybe you faced personally with breaking into the tech industry?
I think the biggest one, and this is also just beyond tech, the biggest one for me was the fact that I didn't believe or follow a lot of corporate taboos or standards. That would often get chalked up to the fact that I was young, that I was naive, that it was my first job. And I just had to let them know that no, these standards are either racist or sexist. It has nothing to do with about it being my first job. So simple things or little things, I shouldn't say simple, but little things like willingness to talk about compensation in front of folks, which is super important because the secrecy behind compensation is why wage gaps exist. Little things like that was a barrier for me. And also just being a opinionated Black woman in the workplace always looks like something. It always looks like an attitude. It always looks like I'm being mean. Um, Tone policing. Now I'm just having a venting session at this point. Tone policing irritates me. The fact that other folks can come into the workplace a certain way with a certain vibe and be seen as a boss. But I'm told to lighten up, go easier. That was a little too strong. Let's bring it back. I literally was told to like stop using periods, add emojis, because when you use periods, it looks like I'm just completing a sentence, right? It looks like I'm just using punctuation. But it isn't what it looks like to other folks. So I think that was the biggest barrier that I had, was sort of reconciling being myself and also folks expecting me to be something else because of the standards that exist in the workplace. And I think that also goes beyond tech. That's just being a Black woman in the workplace. But because the tech industry that I was in at the time was so not diverse, I think that I experienced it to a heightened level at the time.
Yes, I would definitely, I definitely know what you're talking about the whole emoji thing, right? Definitely adding that, like, oh, lightheartedness, right? Like, let me be a little light, with this. So definitely thank you for bringing that up because we hadn't even talked about that. So thank you so much for bringing that up, because it is real. Like those are things that are most likely a lot of our students are going to face. A lot of folks on this call are probably going to face with being in the industry, like you said, any industry, right? So definitely thank you for bringing that up. And so Tay, I know you're in the data space, so what are some emerging areas in tech you're seeing, and how can our audience prepare for the future?
Okay, I think it's the most obvious. Like a lot of services in-house are being automated. And that's not to scare anyone, but that is just what I do. So we do a lot of looking at the everyday aspects of processes and automating them. So I'm seeing more of the things that used to be outsourced are coming back in-house, but they're working with teams that can like have those services. So a lot of what we used to do in data, particularly, like we would have algorithms that would do a portion of the work, but it would be a complete cycle of it. But now they have like part human and then part algorithm. So I'm seeing more of like they're looking at the mistakes that we've been making, unfortunately, within data science and AI. And we're kind of like saying, hey, actually, we went a little too far. We need to look at the research and scale it back down, which is why like I decided to go more of the IT route, because I kind of wanted to see like, oh, what all the parts of the process and not just the data function. I wanted to see all parts of a system on the enterprise level. So that's what I'm seeing more companies like reevaluating how they spent their money as it relates to tech infrastructure. They're kind of looking at the budget line and saying, okay, is this actually giving us what we were looking for? Or can we save money in certain areas by offloading it and bring it in-house and having a team of data engineers on staff instead of having consultants? So it's actually a plus for us if you want to move up in a company now. There's a lot more data positions available. Before it was like you had to be like a consultant or you had to wear like God knows how many hats. So that's something that I've been able to see is like now I actually have one job instead of 5. It's pretty much the difference of what it was before.
Thank you. What about you, Prajanma? What are some emerging areas in tech that you're seeing, and what is some advice for the audience if they're preparing for that future?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of how to address that question because that's a really broad one. So okay, if I think of some of the emerging trends in tech, so definitely AI and deep learning is something that I'm interested in and I have been following for a few years now. So that is something to keep an eye on. Another area which interests me quite a lot is around network effects. So network effects is very relevant for platform businesses today. So it's more business oriented than tech oriented. But if you look at network effects and if you look at the social networking landscape that we have today, so I think there is an area where the social networks. So today we have Instagram and Facebook, which power like one-to-many interactions. There could be a skew towards meaningful one-to-one interactions on social network, and there are some startups which are already coming up in that space. So there's a startup in the UK which is called Peanut, and they connect women who are pregnant in the neighborhood area together so that they can share their experiences and they're on the same journey together. So rather than going on Instagram or Facebook and following people who you don't have that one-to-one connection, they actually provide that connection. And there are some more startups which are sort of under the hood right now, which are coming up in this space. So that is something I'm totally excited about because I think we do need those kind of social interactions more than like today's Facebook and Instagrams that we have today.
Thank you. What about you, Maya? Have you noticed any emerging areas in tech that you're seeing that maybe folks should be paying attention to?
So my lens of tech is kind of different because I'm looking at it from a HR people operations perspective. So what I am sort of looking at, it's not necessarily emergent area, but just how I see things changing in the near future, especially with COVID-19, is incorporating this new inclination to want the hybrid of working from home. I'm putting new in quotes because some people already wanted to work from home and slash come into the office. But I think that there's an increased inclination to want to do that because now this is the new norm and folks are kind of liking how this seems. On one hand, sorry, my boss is FaceTiming me. Let me turn this off. On one hand, lost my train of thought. Oh, increased inclination to do the hybrid of working from home and in the office. So I'm sort of developing and researching what that's going to look like in the future outside of once COVID-19 is no longer a thing, wishful thinking. But also what it looks like for my employees that have expressed the fact that working from home seems a lot more stressful than it was than working in the office. Like working in a virtual world seems a lot more stressful than working in the office for the fact of like, people now expect you to be at your desk 24/7 because you're at home, right? So like you have nothing else to do in quotes, right? Like you like in the office, you can walk away, take a smoke break, go, like get coffee, go outside. Now that you're at home, people just expect you to be at your desk. Like, no, you don't have to cook your lunch, like because you have to be working at your desk. So also developing the policies of what work life balance will look like as we continue to work from home, and also what the new hybrid is going to look like post-COVID world. So I know that's like sort of a flip on your question, but that's just sort of how I view technology at my current company, which is mostly a remote company.
No, I think that's so true. I mean, I know a lot of places are opening back up, so that is something to pay attention to. I know I was speaking to my friend who is in she's actually in student life, so residence life. And so I've been encouraging her to look into tech because I feel like she can utilize her skills there, and she's definitely someone who wants to work remotely. So I said tech is where it's at because they've already been on the trending edge of remote work anyway. So definitely look into that. And it seems like we're probably going to be in quarantine for a little longer. So it's definitely something to look at. And I know a lot of companies have been pivoting to make work from home more available to their employees. So I'm definitely thankful that I've chosen a path where there was an office space. So that way we can easily transition to working from home. So definitely thank you for bringing that up for sure. And so, ladies, what are y'all most excited about for the future, for future technology? What about you, Taye? What are you most excited about?
I actually am really excited about actually scaling back a little bit on technology. Like I actually am like a hermit. I don't like to use technology unless I'm getting paid. And I tell people that all the time. Like I'm not on any device after what 6:01. So I actually love to remind people of that. Like I enjoy technology. I love data, but it's just not the center of my life. And there's a reason why. Like there is something about the human connection that I think needs to be more involved in technology in terms of how we product develop things. Like it seems like we just automatically assume that we know humans so well that we can like predict every little thing that we do, but it's like nothing can really compare to the actual human component. Like I'm sorry, that's just my personal opinion. So I love the fact that companies are kind of rethinking and reevaluating how they are creating their products. They're actually bringing more researchers in. They're actually bringing more data researchers in to say, hey, how are we designing our products? Are we making sure we have the right KPIs and metrics available? Are we having any biases that may exist within our algorithms? Like people are starting to think about the effects of technology because they're seeing the harm that was done, unfortunately, all these years when we were really, really excited about these new tools. And it's not a case of like iRobot, but it's definitely a case where you're like, okay, we are really, really advanced, but is it really necessary for us to be this advanced? And I like the fact that we're kind of thinking about some of the tools that we've created. I like the fact that we're kind of scaling back a little bit. And luckily, I've been able to be on those types of discussions because I definitely want to shift gears. After I get my master's, I want to become a researcher. So I'm actually going to be one of those people to evaluate those policies and say, hey, we've been able to do this, but can we make sure we have regulations in place so that we don't create any more harm?
That's so interesting. I know at the start of COVID, I think our team, the program team at the Knowledge House, we actually watched what is it called? Social Dilemma. I believe it's on Netflix. And so it was super interesting to see a lot of people within like the tech space who were former techies, right, in these roles. And they actually were saying similar to what you were saying, Tay, like scaling back and like really realizing the implication of technology. And we know because we're going to advance, there's no stopping the advancement of technology, but I think also recognizing the impact that it does have. So there will definitely be some opportunities there in terms of career opportunities for people. Like I think that's going to be never ending, right? For the tech space, just as much as we advance, but I think it's definitely important for us to recognize the impact. So I do appreciate that you're like, after 6 o'clock, I am not touching technology. So that's definitely interesting, especially you ladies being in technology. So it's interesting to hear from a techie's perspective that they're also pulling away from that, because we do know that there is an impact that technology has had, and like limiting that face to face, like people connection, is definitely something that we have to be aware of. So once it warms up, hopefully folks are able to get in outside, and because I know quarantine has definitely affected folks. I know it's affected me gratefully, drastically, because I want to go outside, I want to interact. So I definitely appreciate that. What about you, Maia? What are you excited about with technology?
I think what I'm excited about, and this is sort of, it's related to technology, but I'll just say it. I think what I'm excited about is being able to start sooner with getting folks into technology, with getting women involved in technology, with getting people of color involved in technology, and getting women of color involved in technology. I think that if I had the knowledge that I had growing up, picking a major, picking my activities in school, I'd be at a different place than I am now, which is not a bad thing. Like I'm doing pretty okay for 25. But I think that there's just a foundation of knowledge or a foundation of skills that I would have had going into my position. Again, when I was starting at the fintech company prior to where I'm at Juve, no idea what I was doing. Not a single clue. And even when I started at Juve, there were a plethora of skills that I did not have, that everybody else at the company had for a number of reasons, whether it was because of the area that they lived in, socioeconomic status from their parents, or whatever the case may be, just things that I did not have access to growing up. And I think that as we continue to have that conversation regarding equity instead of equality, we can begin to push more folks who typically are left out of the space into the space, and also educate them while they're in that space and prepare them to thrive, and not just throw them in there and be like, okay, we need more people of color in this field. Do what you do. No, like actually fostering the learning curve, or the learning that it will take to get into this field before they're actually entering it. That's something that I'm looking forward to the future of tech, because I feel like we've already started having those conversations. So the next generation of folks will have those skills that I wish that I had coming in.
No, definitely. I definitely think that is needed for sure. We definitely need to see more women in technology. So, like you said, having that space now, and I know Taye had mentioned earlier, like there weren't necessarily folks in her department that maybe looked like her who were women, but she was able to tap into other, like some other networks within the company as well. So, we definitely need to see more women in there, and so like Prajanma said, like just going ahead and applying for these opportunities because they need us, right? They need us. We know we are phenomenal. We can hold it down, right? And hopefully there are those spaces in there where they'll have that learning opportunity for us and like actually have things in place, because the reality is most of the time you're probably going into a space where you're probably one of few women, right? And then I know us on the call as women of color, right? Like that even is smaller. So I think having those that space in there at companies is definitely super important. What about you, Prajanma? What are you most excited about with the future of technology?
Oh gosh, actually, I sort of go back and forth between like two spectrums. So the techie in me will say that, looking forward to the technology, like we are on Mars today, right? And so that is super exciting. We have been talking about self-driving cars, which means that the way we have built cities in the past will be really, really different in the future. That that is exciting to me. Actually, that excites me quite a bit. So all these like new technology and new innovations that are happening in the industry is super exciting. But then on the other hand, I go towards another spectrum, which is how technology can help us drive more equality in our society that we have today. How can we bring everyone at the same level? Because technology does have the power to do that, right? If you think of education, if you think of these kind of avenues, there's a lot that still can be done with technology. And how can technology actually accelerate some of these causes? Having education in a remote town in India, for example, so that people know that what's going on in what other things are available, what career choices are available, like uh, these kind of things I think are super exciting. Also, utilizing technology for a more sustainable life for our future generations, I think that's another avenue which needs to be explored a bit further, and that's a super exciting thing that I would like to keep my eye on as well.
Yes, no, awesome. I know with COVID-19, it's definitely shown the impact technology has had and like the lack of resources in a lot of different areas, right? So like you see, I know I have nieces and nephews, they're actually on Zoom now, right? On their classes, but it's definitely shown the disparity within different communities, right? And so I definitely think it's super important for us to have these resources and have them available to the generations coming in, because we don't want to leave them behind, right? And we know that there is like this sweet spot of like us folks who know technology, know how to navigate computers, and then you have maybe our parents, grandparents who may still tap into you to say, hey, can you help me with this Zelle transaction, right? A lot of things are online. I know I had my grandmother, she was trying to do a return at the post office or something, like file a claim. And they were like, she went to the post office and they said, oh, you have to do it online. And she doesn't have a computer. She right. She doesn't have that. So I think also just making sure that we have those resources so that way folks don't get left behind, because we do know the advancement of technology is there. It's going to continue to grow. And like you said, we're on Mars now, right? So there's definitely that, even that space exploration space is there for people to tap into. Definitely excited about that because that means more career opportunities for people who are interested in space exploration and being in the tech industry for that. So awesome. Thank you, ladies, so much. So right now we're actually gonna go and take some audience questions. So let me pull them up over here. Thank y'all so much for providing some questions for us. Ladies, thank you so much. Y'all been doing a phenomenal job dropping some gems today. So we have a question. So what changes need to be made to most empower women to be confident in their positions within the tech world? So Taye, could you answer that for me? So what changes need to be made to most empower women to be confident in their positions within the tech world?
I think it's just about like raising awareness. And I don't know if that could be through some type of like coaching or workshops, whether that's for women themselves or just men or other people. Because sometimes it's not just the women in these jobs, it's the environment. It's like, do they feel supported in their jobs? That's always a problem. It can come from their supervisor, their team. Like I've had it from every angle in a sense of like, I didn't feel like I had anyone to go to be like, hey, this is a concern of mine. Cause I was like, y'all in each other's bags, y'all cool with each other, it's not gonna work out. So I'm gonna just be quiet. Like I'm gonna just go ahead and just act like everything's cool. And unfortunately, that's not actually a good thing to have to do long term. So I don't, recommend anyone to do that. But when I was first starting out, that's what I did. I knew that, me being in a space where I was the only woman, particularly only Black woman, I didn't really have a lot of allies that were actually true allies. So I think just having workshops or some type of training where we can talk about these issues and make it more general as a way to just raise awareness, because sometimes if someone else is saying it and it's not coming from me, people might receive it better. Because to me, it can be appeared as if I'm just complaining, I just can't handle it, or I'm not made out for tech, or I want something easier, when it's not that. Other women may be experiencing the same thing, but they just might not have spoken up like I have. So that's why I think making it more of like a general thing for everyone on a team or within a company will be a lot more better, because sometimes on individual levels, people might not want to hear your concern. You might not have that support or buy-in from your direct supervisor as well.
Thank you so much for that. So true. So let me go ahead and go to this next one. So what do you say to those who want to be in tech, but not necessarily a programmer? So this one is for Prajanma. What do you say to those who want to be in tech, but not necessarily a programmer?
Yeah, I think tech provides you those opportunities and a great career progression path, even if you don't want to be a programmer. So I have a programmer degree, but I decided to go the business path. So as I mentioned, I have done various roles. I have been an analyst, I have done sales, I have actually done like digital marketing, and now I'm a product marketer. So I have had the opportunity to explore so many different things and learn from different experiences, wear lot of hats, and that actually adds a lot to your experience and adds a lot of value to you. So lots of opportunities, even if you don't want to be a programmer, there are still lots of opportunities in tech that you should potentially look into, and definitely go for those.
Yes, I think there is definitely this misconception that you have to code, right, or be a programmer in the tech space, but there are so many non-tech positions available, and so definitely tapping into that obviously helps a little, right? It helps a little bit to know that, right, especially when you're navigating that space, but it definitely is not knock against you if you do not have that experience. So definitely we need to get more folks in tech. So however you can fit it, right? We have some sales. If you want to be a programmer, then I know Maia, you're in HR. And so there's definitely a lot of space for people, tech people, like non-coding and coding related positions. And so as the Chief People Officer, Maia, how do you implement a culturally inclusive workspace?
That's a great question. That's something that I'm definitely working towards every single day. I don't think that we're anywhere close to where I'd like us to be or need us to be. And who knows how long it's going to take us to get there. But one thing that we're super, super big on is transparency and feedback. And I think that it's one thing to say, hey, fill out this form and be honest. Or you can always come to us when the environment doesn't allow for that. So what I do is talk to my leaders. I don't put the onus on my team. I'm putting the onus on my leaders. Are you creating this space in which your direct report will feel comfortable enough to tell you when you're not being inclusive, to tell you when you're doing something that that's offending them or that's making them feel uncomfortable or whatever the case may be, or even little things like we've had conversations about how we can be better leaders for folks that are neurodiverse, because we've had a number of leaders mention that they have ADD or ADHD, right? So what inclusion looks like is talking to folks from these different backgrounds and creating the environments in which they feel comfortable enough to be honest with you about what you can improve on. And I will say that my company, even though I said that we have a long way to go, I would say we're definitely doing it right in the fact that our team is extremely comfortable giving us feedback and advice, which I love. I don't take it offensive at all. I think that tells me that they're comfortable being their true selves with me, and comfortable enough to tell me and how I can be a better leader for them. So that's one super important thing that my company is doing that we value. And I think a way that I would like to see other leaders do this is, we say that it's okay for them to push back on us. So we push back on each other publicly, never in a rude way, but to show them like, hey, you can also push back on Ziad, who's our CEO. If, when you see other folks do that, you feel comfortable enough to do that as well. So those are two important things that's super important super pertinent to me to make sure that we're keeping an inclusive environment. And then also having CRG groups, allowing folks to create their own communities if they feel like there's a group missing, and not just a CRG group, but an interest-based group. All of those things are super important for folks to feel like they're able to build community where they work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're definitely interested in feedback. I know sometimes our students get a little annoyed by us because we ask every week. We're like, fill out the feedback survey, right? But we definitely take that feedback to heart. Like we want to know how we can improve the program for our students. And so we definitely do look at the feedback and want to implement as many resources and things that we can to assist our students. And so we're definitely all about feedback. We want to be able to know what we're doing, good, bad, or indifferent. We want to know. And sometimes, like you said, creating that space, like some folks maybe in the beginning were like, hey, do you guys really care about the feedback? And we're like, no, we do. We look at it, right? Like we're checking in, we're tapping in to see like, how can we better serve you being in the program? So definitely think that is super important. So thank you so much for bringing it up, because we love a space where you could just openly just be like, hey, this needs to improve. You're doing well here, but hey, we still got some space to be moving, right? We still have some things to be doing. So thank you so much for that. We do have a couple more questions. Thank y'all so much for these questions. So this one is for everyone. So what's one actionable piece of advice you have specifically for men to be more supportive for women in tech? Maia, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I have one. One instantly popped into my head. That's why I started laughing. This is also, I guess, not specific to tech, but I've noticed it in these types of settings often. The talking over women and the mansplaining happens a lot in industries that are male dominated. I find myself often in a situation like, oh, you must have not heard me talking because I hear you that you're talking over me. I just wanted to make sure, I just want to start over so I can finish my sentence. That's a main thing. Again, allowing that space for women to feel and be heard is super important. And that's a small thing that I don't even think lots of people notice that makes a difference. To feel heard when I have a thought, when I have an idea that I want the team to like listen to, even if we don't even go with the idea, even if the idea is not a good one, like just allowing me the space to get it off my chest and get my creative juices flowing is super, super important. And I think also sitting back and listening when women are speaking. I think it's easy to get defensive when you're being held accountable for something. And I'm not saying this specifically to men. I just mean that as a person. Like whenever you're being held accountable for something, it's easy to be like, I didn't do that, or my intentions aren't like that. But hearing women out when they are holding you accountable about something that has happened in the workplace is also just another step in making folks feel seen and heard.
No, I definitely feel you on that one. Snaps on that one. So hopefully you men in the audience are listening to these gems that are being dropped over here. Anybody else want to answer that one? If not, we can move to the next. Prajanma,
Can I add something? So I think for men, that question itself is a good start, right? You want to figure out how you can support women. I think that itself is a good start, a good frame of mind to be in. Uh, and and then just trying to understand that the corporate world actually looks very different for women, and having some empathy about that, developing some understanding about it could be a really, really good start. And then in terms of one actionable thing, this is something that I used to do with my female colleagues. Something that Maya said, right? When you are trying to talk, like so many people are talking over you, and when you are just like a couple of females in a big group of males, then you don't get heard. So whenever that situation will come, then I'll step up and I'll say that, hey, wait, Sarah has a point, or like Maya has a point. So like my female colleagues who couldn't get their voice out, I'll actually try and step up at that point and make sure that they get it heard, and they will reciprocate and do the same for me. So as it doesn't need to be that women are doing that for other women. Just being aware of that and seeing that if somebody is not able to get their voice through, just do that, and I think that could be a great step towards it.
I think that's the most important part, is just the communication channel and the empathetic, humble understanding. There's a lot of men in technology, and women are constantly having to be up against a dominant force that we have no control over. So it's with thoughtful leadership decisions. It's really about setting the standard of what you will and will not accept. And although it's a very difficult situation, there's an opportunity to showcase your strength in a unique way that will set the tone for the future, not only for yourself, but for women in the company who may, as Praj said, may not have that voice to say, hey, you know what, you are talking over me. So you're subtly helping people and building that community and that cultural expectation of, we should not have this conversation. I am talking, you are talking, we are both people in this company. So the fact that we have to have this conversation, it's a force that we cannot shatter, no matter how many times we step up and then we're said, oh wow, that was really passive aggressive. Oh, she's a little micro angry. Oh, she's a little dramatic. Oh, she's a little exaggerated. No, it's the fact that we as women have subliminal messages thrown at us, and we either are the pitch and catch, or we just release it and carry forward. And we are so programmed to compete with each other, especially in corporate America, that you become siloed in the vision of it's me, not we. And so with the cultural resource groups, with the employee development opportunities, networking with each other versus competing with each other is something that we need to continue to showcase as a force to be reckoned with. Because let me tell you, I've been in companies where the entire leadership team is men and they called me dramatic. And I was just like, what are you talking about? I manage a team of 10. I understand where you're coming from. We're speaking the same language. You're not listening. So it's adapting, accepting, but competing with no one. It's empowering everyone. And I think that's really the difference that women need to make within ourselves. Beauty standards, media standards, social media standards are so filtered and diluted that you have a sense of competing with something unexpectable, unattainable, but then you are guilty of buying into this dream that's manifested of what, from where. So it's really belief in what you bring to the table, showcasing that value and understanding where to draw the line to set that forward movement into play.
Thank you so much, Monica. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm over here like snaps. Thank you for that. We have time for about 1 or 2 questions. So, how have you navigated microaggressions at work? What are your tips for advocating for yourself in the workplace, especially for those that are new to the job? And I guess this goes hand in hand with what we were just talking about, like even in those spaces where maybe women are being spoken over by men, like what would you say um, that you would give, like what advice would you give for people coming into that space, like navigating that?
I think it's setting the tone that you're coming from understanding of wanting to understand and wanting to get clarification versus, emotionally being reactive. You're proactively coming in trying to understand, especially if you're new in a company. The cultural fit is still an anomaly that you're trying to navigate through. So it's better to take the approach of, listen, I understand I am new to this position. I would love to get clarification on what your understanding is of my role. Here's where I'd like to learn more about your role, and let's get to a place where we can work together. It's always an uncomfortable conversation, but if you take it from the approach of you're educating yourself to better produce, people love to talk about themselves. So if you try to make them feel better about what they're talking about, but put in your little points of, hey, listen, here's the message I want you to get, they'll get it. They may not absorb it right away, but when they think back about that conversation, what you said will be understood. So it's really just come from a sense of empathy. Probably 60% of the time, people are not coming from a malicious place. They're coming from a miscommunication or mistranslation of their own biases. So you want to have that conversation in a way where you're humbly coming for clarification, but you want to understand what the intention was, because either way it needs to be discussed. But I think understanding always sets the tone for, hey, let's talk, versus rah, 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 oh gosh, here comes Monica again, what does she want? You know what I mean? So it's, you want to set that tone, and especially because you're new, you're still learning the company culture, and they may not be a company of communication. So this is a learning point for you to input, hey, here's the way I need to work to be successful. Let's start communicating. And that may be something new to them, or it may not be something that they're used to doing because they haven't done it in a long time. So understanding, empathy, and really just humble communication. Don't come across as, coming for vengeance or coming from a point of anger. It's more of dissecting what the true meaning was of the miscommunication.
I think, oh, can I add on? I think it's a conversation. Well, when we talk about navigating microaggressions, I think it's a conversation of intent versus impact. How did this phrase or this sentence or this action impact not just you, but the overall stigma or idea behind what they said? I think in terms of how to navigate the microaggressions really depends on, and I think Monica was touching on this, like how long you've been in your role, in the culture of your company. I'm very hesitant to give a one size fit all answer because my company is extremely what fosters environment for open communication. So like I'm in a position where if my CEO or my COO says something, I can have a direct conversation with them. But I do understand that that is not the case in all companies. And I think that that's the time for you to sit down and think about what is the best way for me to go about this situation. At some companies, you might be able to have a direct conversation with that person if you feel comfortable doing so. Is HR the best route for you? Is talking to a fellow colleague or somebody that they work close with that like determining what the best route is really going to depend on the company. However, I would definitely encourage folks to say something if they can and when they can, even if it's not the next day. I've had somebody touch my hair in the office, and somebody else who I actually know was like, don't, because she saw my face, she saw that I was about to, get a little angry. She was like, she's cool, like, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay, interesting. 3 months later, that same person actually apologized to me and was like, I shouldn't have policed the way that you would have reacted to her touching her hair because I know her, but you don't. So that was months later that she ended up bringing this situation up to me. And I say that to say there's no time limit on when you can address a situation. So even if you need 2 weeks to like get your thoughts together and process what happened to you, take those 2 weeks and then proceed with the route that makes sense for you. But there's no time limit on when you can say something, how you should react to the situation. And to me, the best situation or the best way to react is in a way that will allow you to keep your job at the end, while telling your truth. That like there's no one size fit all for that answer, unfortunately, because company cultures are so different. So I don't, yes, period. So that's sort of my advice.
Thank you. Thank y'all so much. Thank y'all so much for the jewels that y'all have dropped today. It was such a pleasure to chat with y'all. Thank y'all, audience, for the questions. We definitely appreciate the panelists today for being here. You all are much appreciated. We need to get you ladies in I mean, I'm over here like, oh yeah, we can tap into you. I know we had someone in the chat talk about how can we get some of y'all on here. So we'll definitely be in touch with y'all because it seemed like we had an educator in the chat as well. He wanted to know how he can get his students to be involved in tech, specifically the girls in his classroom. I believe it was fourth graders. So definitely we'll want to continue to try to make that impact, continue to make the impact, because we do know women rule the world, right? And we are more than capable of doing our thing and the tech industry and beyond. So definitely appreciate you ladies for coming in and being a part of the panel. Thank you so much for Cloudinary for sponsoring this event, Derek for putting this together. Shameless plug, we are recruiting right now for our program. So we do have our year-long innovation fellowship where we have a couple tracks. So if you're interested in data science, if you're interested in web development, UX UI design, or if you are interested in cybersecurity and networking, so please check out our website and apply for our programs. We definitely want to see more women in our programs. We do have some women on this call right now who are representing for our fellows. So thank y'all so much for joining us today. So for sure, we want to continue to have these conversations, continue to support each other in this network. So I definitely appreciate you all for joining us today. And please look out for a follow-up email where we're going to be asking you all about how your experience went today, and we'll be happy to know. Like I said, we're all about feedback, so definitely let us know good, bad, and different with your experience today. So thank you so much for joining. We appreciate y'all. Any last words, ladies?
No last words. Thank you. This was great. And it was super exciting. You guys asked amazing questions. So happy that I could be here to chat with you all on this day. Thank y'all for having me.
Taye, you have some last words?
Just keep going. That's my only words. Just keep going. I'll be here.
What about you, Prajanma? Any last words?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone, for joining in today's conversation, and for you guys to take care of everything, especially for our amazing host as well. It was really lively conversation. Yeah, so it was really good. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, awesome. Thank y'all so much. Y'all have a good rest of your day. Happy Monday, y'all. Happy International Women's Day.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right,
Bye.
bye, y'all. Have a good one, everyone.